Tema Talks is brought to you by the Tema Memorial Trust, which is Canada's leading provider of peer support, family assistance, education and training for emergency services, public safety, military personnel, and their families. Check out tema.ca for more information. The views, opinions, and endorsements expressed in each podcast episode are those of the host and the guest alone, and do not necessarily reflect the official position of the Tema Memorial Trust. The subject matter of this podcast may be triggering for some listeners. Please take the time to get yourself in a calm and positive mind space before listening so you can get the most out of the podcast. Okay, cue the music and enjoy this episode of Tema Talks.
Hello people, and welcome to Tema Talks. Welcome to PTSD Awareness Month as well. I'm trying to do my part by putting out 8 podcasts in June. After this one, we're halfway there, halfway home. So thank you everybody for listening and supporting. Also thank you to those who are speaking out and speaking up about mental health and mental illness, whatever that may be, whether it affects first responders or just humans in general. Thank you for your work. It's a human problem, not just a first responder problem. Okay, so I want to talk about something before we get into our guest for this episode. As you know, over the past week or so, we've had a couple of high-profile celebrities die by suicide. And I'm on Facebook the other day, and I see this post. And here's what it says. A celebrity commits suicide and the whole world comes to a stop. 22 veterans a day commit suicide and no one bats an eye. Okay, I have a couple problems with this. My first problem is the word commit. I know we've always said it, the phrase commit suicide. We need to stop that, I think, and say something more factual, and that is died by suicide, in my opinion. People die by cancer, or from cancer, from other illnesses. We don't say someone committed cancer, so why do we say commit suicide? It brings about a thought of a criminal act, and that the person who died by suicide did something wrong. Just my thought. I think we should get out of the habit of saying commit. Here's the second thing that I have a problem with. It is no surprise to me at all that when a celebrity dies by suicide, it gets a lot of attention. These people are in the public eye. They have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of fans and followers on social media who follow their every move. So of course, when something like this happens, it's going to be all over the media, all over social media. It's going to be a big deal. And that's just the way it is. As I said, it's not a shock, it's not a surprise. It makes sense to me. And now the other side of this coin is this. We have an epidemic amongst the first responder community, and that is first responders dying by suicide. It's an epidemic, and we need to somehow fix it. So we need to talk about it. We need to get that information out there. We need to make sure people know these statistics. However, we don't need to do that by comparing it to something else, by comparing it to another life that is lost. And by doing so, for me, it brings about a feeling like we're comparing and almost saying like one life is worth more than another life, or should be seen as that way, or belittling one side. We need to get out of that habit right away. These are human lives that we're losing. And there is no rank, there is no level of human life, there is no human life that is more valuable than another at all. So I think we can do good work and get the word out there just by talking about it, not comparing it to something else. Stop comparing, stop competing, start supporting and educating. Just my opinion. Let me know what you think. All right, that's my bit for today. My guest this episode is none other than Nick Halmasy. He is a firefighter and the creator of After the Call. Awesome guy. Had a great chat. You're going to hear some noise in the background because through some of the podcast, his dogs were having a good time. So don't worry, Nick's not trying to do construction or home renovations while he's talking to me. It's just life. It's life going on in the background, so get through it. We'll be all right. Just giving you a heads up. All right. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get to it.
It was a dark and stormy night, nor'easter rolling in.
Welcome to Tema Talks, Nick. I am stoked to have you here.
I'm glad to be here, man.
Perfect. Excellent. I'm wanting to have you on for a long time. I've been following you on social media for quite a while, and I'm just really happy that we finally got this together and we're going to do it.
Yeah, technical complications aside.
It's always bound to happen. As soon as you need it, everything breaks down.
Exactly.
So that's okay. So Nick, for me, who wants to learn more about you, and for our listeners who may not know you, tell us your origin story, how you grew up, what that was like, and what led you to get into firefighting.
Yeah, sure. I mean, growing up was kind of normal. We were, my family's small town Ontario, so we were bouncing around. I grew up in Cobourg, which is just about an hour east of Toronto. So usually you describe it by an hour east of Toronto. And, I grew up there. My dad actually is a captain, with one of the local volunteer fire departments. And so what had happened was I had decided that I was going to grow up to design video games, and that was my plan. That's what I did all my high school courses in, and I went to college, and that's what I was doing. And then 4 months in, decided that, holy shit, I don't want to do this at all. I ended up dropping out, and that was a dark period because, my whole life was kind of geared towards that, where I was even emailing developers, and I was like, what do you need? I'll take what you need. And they were really good getting back to you. So it was one of those things where, I thought my life was going to be one thing, and then it just smashed. It was something else. And so when I landed back at home, I got a job at a factory. And then, almost simultaneously, I was actually got onto the volunteer department. So I was 18 at the time. And my first structure fire actually was on my 19th birthday. So,
oh, wow. Yeah,
that was pretty neat. It was a good birthday gift. I mean, I know people from outside the service might go, how morbid is that? But for me, that was an awesome birthday gift. No one was hurt. No one was home. So,
you're right though. That's how you feel about it. You're stoked for it. Not that you want people to be hurt or anything like that, but your adrenaline's pumping, and that's what you're there for.
That was great, right? Like putting the wet on the red. I was like, this is what you do, So
that's right.
So that's kind of my origin story into the fire service. So, kind of, normal small town guy. I didn't really, but my plan was one thing and it was something else, which seems to be a theme in my life actually. So I did the fire service for, probably, I want to say 2 or 3 years while I worked at the factory. And I was like, I can't do this. You know what I mean? This is what a non-college, education is going to get you. I can't do this. So I actually went back to college, saved up some money, went back to college, and I was, your fire listeners will be upset with me, but I was actually going to go get my EMS ticket.
And right on. There you go. Right on.
So I didn't get in though, because I didn't have, my high school biology. I would say that I was interested in extracurriculars in high school than actually the schoolwork.
Right.
And, I didn't get in, so I got into what was a pre-health course. So essentially it was, you get into the course, you do 80% or better, you get advanced standing into the EMS course, and the nursing was another one. So I was like, okay. So I landed in that course, and I was going through that, and I can't remember if it was first semester, second semester. I had intro to psych course, and I wasn't an A student, but I wasn't a D or C student either. I was a happy medium, right? It was like I floated the B's pretty good, and I was comfortable with that. But I was nailing psych, and the teacher pulled me aside and said, listen, I don't know what your plan is, but I really think with these, with your passion about it, you should pursue this at a higher level. So that was rift too, because then I had to decide, because I didn't have the grades in high school to go to university. But they had a transfer course, so I could do essentially a intense first year university at a college. So it had two benefits. One, I could go to university after, but second, I only had to pay college tuition, so that was great. So I ended up choosing that over the paramedic courses. So,
Right.
I went into that, and then, 4 years later, I had my undergraduate degree, was going to go out and change the world with all my psych knowledge, and anybody with a psych degree will tell you that it doesn't get you anything. So, I floated around. I was still in the fire service at this time, doing a lot of instructing too. So, I guess if
Nick, how did you, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but so with that, so you have this undergraduate degree now in psych, and you're still a firefighter.
Correct.
How did you find that? Were you starting to notice things more in the fire service because of your psych degree?
So, I was starting to connect the dots. I'm hesitant. I've never actually thought about that before. It's not a question anybody's asked me. I'm hesitant to say that I kind of recognized the problems as I do now.
Right.
When we talk about a little bit about the service and kind of, why I started after the call, because there's one call kind of in particular that really that rocked me into noticing, right? But,
right.
I was aware at that time when I did my undergraduate degree that I was going to marry the two somehow. But I didn't know how. I didn't know how yet. So, most of my project, as you can, guess, were around first responders and stuff like that. So I started working with the material, but, when was that? I'm just trying to think of the dates now, but even then, I would say that was easily 12 years ago. It wasn't a big deal. Like, not like it is now, right? It wasn't well known. We didn't talk about it in service.
Did you find that you were recognizing firefighters around you that were in trouble?
No. So the undergraduate degree did not give me that kind of skill, right? An undergraduate degree for anybody, in psych, for anybody that's never taken one or has been curious about it, is essentially like opening a cookbook and you just get a little flavor for everything, right? So,
right.
I mean, I'm learning with Freud and, Jung and while that's all good and fine, there's really useless knowledge. It doesn't really help you in trying to do this stuff other than give you a historical foundation.
Right.
So,
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So, but I wanted to do something more, and the undergraduate degree didn't give me that. But anyway, so I was still on the fire department. I'm trying to think of, I think it was my second year in, just kind of switching gears and moving to the fire service. This is important. And we actually went to a suicide by train. And this is kind of the call that I recognized rocked me. And I'm not diagnosed and don't currently struggle with what I would say is any kind of PTSD or PTSI or OSI stuff. But that call was one that I clearly experienced post-traumatic stress.
Right.
And, I had what I now know is kind of a normal reaction to such a scene, right? I had the nightmares and I had,
That's a good point, Nick. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you again, but can you explain for our listeners, because this often gets confused,
Sure.
the difference between post-traumatic stress and then post-traumatic stress disorder?
Of course. So, post-traumatic stress is a normal reaction that you can expect to have on a call that rocks you in. That I leave it vague because it can be literally anything. I mean, anything. So, for those who might be listening that aren't in the service, you would think that the headliner calls are the ones that do that to you. But in reality, in my experience anyway, it's the ones that don't make the headlines, like this suicide by train or the medical calls where families are around, stuff like that. Right. Those are the hard ones, right? So that's post-traumatic stress. It's a normal reaction. I hate to give it a guideline because someone will be like, oh, if I go 6 days, then I'm in trouble. But, the DSM, which is the Bible for all this, it says about 5 days, right? So about 5 days, you can reasonably expect to experience nightmares, irritability, lack of sleeping, kind of always on your mind. And again, I hesitate to say reliving. I don't have a better word in my head right now, but definitely, maybe intrusive memories, but not flashbacks. Again, that's different. But
those are all normal symptoms of your brain trying to process it.
100%.
Okay.
Right. If we think about it like this, it is experience, as you know, but maybe for the listeners, experience completely outside of what your expectations of the world are. For the scene for me, there's bits that, without getting into the gore, there's bits and pieces and they look surreal, right? They didn't look real to me because I didn't have experience to suggest that it was real. It looked like movie set pieces, essentially. And that was one of the things that stuck with me the most. So that's post-traumatic stress. I kind of went on a tangent there. Sorry.
No, we're good. That's exactly what we're here for. That's what I want. We're good.
So that's post-traumatic stress. Now, post-traumatic stress disorder is something much more insidious and sinister. And, it's experienced these things at a high level. There's, 3 or 4 pages of symptomologies that you can experience. And without getting too technical, you need, let's say, a handful of them at a time, but you need to experience that for 30 days or more. And that's the one thing I think that sometimes the media and when we talk about it, we miss because we don't give people credit for that. And that's true suffering in my view, in my estimation, right? It's true suffering. And
it is.
So I get aggravated and get myself into trouble, but I get aggravated and upset when we label tough for sure, traumatic, definitely, but not necessarily PTSD in those in the media, right? So when we hear about the tough call and then we say, responders may have PTSD after that call, right? And this is a sticky thing because we want the support and we need people to know that this is the reality. But at the same time, it does a disservice because it's not giving true credit to those who actually are experiencing those things. Kind of the bona fide real disorder, right? So,
right.
And I don't know how in depth we want to get, but even acute stress disorder, which is kind of the thing right before PTSD, not that there's a hierarchy again. So I'm trying not to confuse people that are listening, but there is acute stress disorder, which is, after that 5 days, but before that 30, which is just significant, which is just as difficult, but it's different. And we're not talking about that. And we don't have WSIB coverage for that. And we don't have, support for that. Right. So
right.
I guess I see myself in what I do is kind of the guy playing the nuances around this as someone who rides both the first responder hat, but also a clinician hat. And,
you brought up a good point, Nick, and don't worry, I'll bring you back to the train. I wrote it down. So, because I'm pulling you in all bunch of different directions. So you reminded me of something. I want to ask your opinion on it.
Sure.
And so I see that there's some movements, and I respect it, and I want everybody to be able to do what they want. But there's this movement to take out disorder because some people feel like that's not correct, and that's totally fine. And again, I respect everybody's right to call it whatever they want. For me, disorder makes perfect sense. That's for me when you hear the clinical, definition of it, disorder fits.
Yep.
I don't, me myself, I don't put some extra negativity or extra stigma on it because it has disorder in it. I look at it clinically, it makes sense to me. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm with you. I think that and you can give me what you believe, but I believe that this to be true is that in the first responder world, when we have to deal with something, we take it and make it our own.
Yeah.
So there's this push to make it an injury.
And that makes sense to me too. I can see that.
Yeah, and this is the argument that I always hear, which is a really interesting one, and I'm surprised that it doesn't get not rebutted, but just kind of confronted enough. So this is kind of how the argument goes, is that it's an injury because we have a brain change. And that's true. I mean, right. That's true, but we also have a brain change with, depression. Mm-hmm. We also have a brain change when you start smoking cigarettes. So these things are interesting to me because I wouldn't say that I would take away disorder from depression. I think that would be foolish. And I wouldn't take that away from an anxiety, for instance. But if we're going to stick to that kind of definition, then, smoking has the same kind of impact. You see what I'm saying? Or,
yeah.
depression has sort of the same impact. So why are we calling these ones disorders? And the other thing that's frustrating for me, not so much as what people call it, because I think that that's good because it furthers the conversation, and we can have conversations like we are now to kind of prise that apart. So I think that that's healthy and good. But the end of the day, you're not going to get coverage for a post-traumatic injury. You're going to get coverage for post-traumatic stress disorder. That's what you're going to get coverage for, at least in Ontario.
Absolutely. And for me, I look at it like this. I don't, again, respecting everybody else's, what they need to do, I don't need to rename what I have or what I was diagnosed with in order to feel better for it. That's not gonna, or feel better about it. It's not gonna serve any purpose for me in my road to healing. It's not gonna change anything. Mm-hmm. It's not gonna make it any easier. It's not gonna make it any less hard work to get through. So I choose, and this is my personal, this is my personal choice. I don't choose to put effort into what they're calling it. Mm-hmm. Because I need to put effort into getting better.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, but I think that, and I don't have enough experience kind of outside of my circle to know if this is true. So someone can correct me if they listen and say, Nick, you're wrong. I welcome that. But
for sure, I'd love to hear the feedback. And again, for those of you that are listening that are maybe getting upset about this conversation, I want you to know that I fully endorse your right to call it whatever you want. Whatever gets you through it, that is fine with me totally. Yeah, I just want everybody to know that.
And I think what I notice the most, though, is it's folks who are dealing with it, who are living it, are the ones that would like to change the name because, and I think it's a noble reason because I think what their belief is it takes the stigma away, right? It recreates it to something that's less stigmatized at this point. But it's the clinicians who are pushing and saying disorder makes sense. We're not curing the stigma by changing the name. We cure the stigma by keeping the name and taking the stigma away from it. So
that's
somebody
can
have it and live it, and it's like, no, that's okay, right? And I think, and this is another thing. If I hope you don't mind, I like to say things that get me in trouble. But this is the other thing that gets me in a bit of a trouble too, is that I think that our emphasis on this being the only thing that first responders can get is problematic. I've taken in personally, and maybe this is just anecdotal, and I'm using that as bias towards this, but personally, I've taken phone calls by people upset because they do not have that diagnosis, despite seeing multiple clinicians that can do that, so psychiatrists and psychologists. And because that's the only thing that they're allowed to have, that's the only thing that's respected in the field, that's the only thing that, it's the only thing that we have said, okay, if you have this, that's okay.
Right.
And it seems fitting to me, and I don't mean to make light of it, but it does seem fitting to me that it's the worst of the worst that first responders are allowed to have, right? It's that hero mentality all over again.
Right.
And this end. So, I mean, again, that usually gets me in trouble when I bring that up, but those are the types of things that I'm hoping we can look at. And I think that we need to give respect to people who have PTSD, the bona fide, diagnosed, PTSD.
Yeah.
As well, leave room for those who are just struggling with depression, anxiety, acute stress disorder, those other smaller and not in, I hate using words like that because people think I'm diminishing it, but just less intense and serious. In all reality, it's still serious and it still needs attention, but it just also needs the support of us to say it's okay to have.
For sure. I'm going to ask you another question now. So, because you reminded me of something else. Would you agree that, people in general, but I know we talk about first responders, so I'm going to talk about first responders.
Okay.
First responders, they'll get an appointment to go see a psychologist. Mm-hmm. They'll start to feel uncomfortable, so they will leave, and they will not go back to that psychologist, and they'll find a different psychologist. Do you find that happens a lot?
I don't have experience knowing that, personally. I can say that it fits with the personality that I would see when I'm meeting with people.
Right. So, that being said, what she was talking to me about is we were just talking about what we thought the prevalence might be of, okay, so I'll use me for an example. I'm having issues, so I go see a psychologist. I don't like what that person may be telling me about myself. So before I get a diagnosis, I bail.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I go to another one. and I go through the same thing, and before I get a diagnosis, I bail. So I don't have a diagnosis only because I didn't stick it out. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah.
I'm just wondering how prevalent that is.
Yeah, I don't know. I would say it's probably prevalent.
Yeah, I think so too.
Don't think that that's first responder specific.
No, it's not. It's not at all.
Yeah, I think that's people specific. So, I mean, I could take this in a number of ways. I mean, I guess my rebuttal to it isn't to disagree, because I think that that's likely true. I think that, from my experience, it's really true. But I wonder then if we stop putting the emphasis necessarily on seeking diagnosis right away. So what I mean by that, and I'm to be honest with you and your listeners, this is the first time I've thought about this, so I'm just kind of collecting my thoughts on it. But I'm wondering if it wouldn't be wise then to see a therapist or a counselor first to work on those emotional regulation skills, to work on, grounding skills and different things to allow you to hear things about yourself you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
And if you collect those skills, then you're ready to go into into potentially sitting down to fill out your questionnaires and doing the hours and hours of conversation with the psychologist as they work out your diagnosis, which is trying in and of itself, right? And can be very cold and calculated too, but.
Yeah, and not easy. Like, not easy to hear. 100%. And I find that, and this is a human condition. This isn't first responder specific, but as soon as we start to get uncomfortable or things start to get not easy, we find another path. We find an easier path.
Yeah, we compartmentalize. This is keynote first responder stuff, right? So, and going back to the calls that we see, it's like you walk in, you're immediately uncomfortable. That's like the primary thing. You're like, oh, I'm uncomfortable. And then the second thing you do is I got a job to do. So we compartmentalize the uncomfortability and we do our work, right? But we never, ever, and I can only speak for me, but I never, ever went back to how I felt.
Yeah.
Never. Why would I? It's done and it's over with. And when you get back to the hall, everybody's like, I'm good. You're good. Yeah, we're all good. So it's like, you never go back. Right. And that's where I think the problem is. And that's where that, cumulative stress, I think, comes in heavy into play is we don't go back and we don't deal with what's caused the stress to begin with. So you get enough of those back to back, that's going to rock anybody's world. I don't care who you are.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll pull you back out of the rabbit hole here now, Nick. So the train, you had this train incident you were talking to me about before I drew you away there.
That's all right. I'm glad you're writing it down because I
had to write it down because I would have totally forgotten it. It would have been gone.
Yeah. So, and I don't remember the specifics of where it was in that, but I think what I was talking about.
You had just mentioned it. You just started to mention that it was a call that did affect you.
Yeah. So this is when I draw a lot of my inspiration for After the Call, and that really sparked my passion and drive into doing what I do now. And so I went to this call, and this call was important for a number of reasons. First, it was my introduction to post-traumatic stress, although there wasn't a name for that. Well, there was, but I didn't know about it. And nobody talked about it for that time. So post-traumatic stress, not disorder, but just the experience of post-traumatic stress.
Right.
But it also showed me a couple other things. The first other things was the camaraderie that can actually be had by the three services, which was really important because the dark humor came out in full-fledged during this call because nobody really had a job to do, right? Like clearly
there's nothing to do.
Right. So
yeah.
People smarter than me are asking why we're even there, right? Like, yeah. For me, I was just happy to be on the truck and riding. Like I was still green at this time, but so to see that camaraderie and to know that, we can play nice in the sand and get along despite, outside forces and that. So that was always something I kept near and dear and why I think, I won't be pigeonholed to fire specific, aid. I've been really pushing kind of all three services, generally speaking, but I'll speak to dispatch and corrections and all of that kind of capture that, right? But, so that was the other thing. But the third thing and the most irritating when I look back had nothing to do with first responders at all, but the conductor of the train. So this is the most interesting and most frustrating piece. So the conductor of the train gets off and he first is okay with it because unbeknownst to us at the time, but later we found out this happens more frequently than we know. And he experienced it multiple times. Mm-hmm. So immediately and I can't remember which company it was, but immediately he was taken out of service. So as soon as that happened, they sent another conductor down. So he was there only while waiting for his pickup and the other conductor to take over. And then he was given a mandatory 2-week leave with pay. So that 2-week leave was for him to decompress. He got the support he needed mentally, and he had to do both, I believe, and now I might be speaking out of turn, but I believe he had to do both a check-in with the psychologist prior to leaving for that 2 weeks and on return. And this was like...
I hope so. I hope he did. That would be good.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at was, there was police, fire, EMS, some other services there, and we ran other calls that day.
Yeah.
This guy was there. He was in the train. There's nothing he can do, but then gets this treatment that makes so much sense, right? It just makes so much sense. And I look back on that, and it's a cause for a little bit of anger, but maybe it springs from jealousy, like how can we still not be treating our folks with that same kind of level of understanding of what you go through? And I haven't got an answer for that, but that story is interesting and important to me for those numerous reasons. So that's the kind of the passion and fire I draw from for when I created After the Call, because I was like, you know what? If support at that time was definitely paid for. You had to pay no matter where you went to do whatever you got to do, right? And After the Call wasn't meant to be an intervention or a therapy, but it was just saying, I'm going to give you whatever I can create and do for free. And I'm just going to develop this. I'm going to put out just kind of worksheets and info sheets, and I'm going to put out blogs and stories and everything that I can draw on from my experience both in fire, but also my clinical experience, to just support those who might need it. And, maybe it's helpful, maybe it's not, but that's kind of my passion is every other kind of support is free in Canada except for, mental health, unless you wait for it, which most of us can't do. So I just wanted to be a little bit of beacon of hope, and support. And as far as I can, I mean, there are a few things that I do charge for, but only because it costs me money to make it, like the book.
Yeah.
So, but everything else I offer is best as I can for free. And, so in a roundabout way, in a way that I kind of combined all of those, that's kind of the story. I mean, the only missing is I went and got my master's degree to allow me to actually do therapy with folks. So,
right.
But that was a no-brainer kind of in the trajectory that I was headed when I found out that my undergraduate degree was useless.
I want to say that it is also really special. I know for first responders, we like to think that we're special. So it's really,
we are.
I think it's really nice that if you do have an issue, you can go talk to a psychologist who also is a first responder.
Yeah. So psychotherapist, not psychologist.
Psychotherapist.
Yeah, so it's sticky because I can get in a lot of trouble for this, but all the jargon sounds the same, right? So
right. Okay. Well, what's the difference then? Tell me the difference.
Right. So I am able to treat individuals in psychotherapy, which is defined sort of vaguely as severe kind of disorders that impact on the daily life. That's it, and the reason it's vague is it was just the act was just proclamated in December of this last year. So I'm a registered psychotherapist. There's also social worker who can do similar job as I, and that would be typically who you would have saw up until recently. You would have saw typically a social worker as a therapist. Okay. But then there's a psychologist who's a doctor in psychology, so they can diagnose but cannot prescribe. And then there's a psychiatrist who is a medical doctor first with training in mental illness who can prescribe. So that's kind of the trajectory.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So a psychologist cannot prescribe?
Correct.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. All right, so I want to talk about After the Call, but first I'm going to ask you a question that everybody else is probably thinking right now. Are your dogs renovating your house, or what are they doing?
Can you hear that now?
I can hear that. They're having a good time.
Yeah, he slowly brought his bone into the room. I was hoping that if I continued to talk, you wouldn't hear it.
No, it's totally okay. Yeah. It's life. It's normal life. It's good. It's all good.
Give me 5 seconds. I'll move it, and we might have another 40 minutes before he gets close enough to hear.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah. Give me 5 seconds here.
All right, yep.
All right.
All right, we're back.
Quiet for it.
Cool. All right. So you mentioned it after the call. Tell us what it is. Tell us all about it and how you started it.
Perfect. So after the call started as a website, I created it probably maybe 5 years ago now, 6 years ago. And essentially what it was I had to do for my master's degree, I had to do kind of a keynote project, which was I had to develop a resource that didn't exist. And so that ended up being the book in a large part, not fully, but from that I drew out from that project all of these different resources, and I said, I'm going to create a website that people can just go on for free and take it and use it and make it their own. And so that's really where it was born out of. It was just my love for the service, like my love for fire specifically. I can't speak to loving the other ones. I never did it, but just the atmosphere and the culture and the brotherhood. And I know that might upset some people, but that's what we've called it. But the camaraderie between everybody. And I said, I want to give back because it, like I said, that was a dark time in my life when I got into it, and it kind of drew me out of that. I'm not going to say my entire time in the service was, roses, rainbows, and unicorns, but I certainly enjoyed what I did. And in there, and I forgot to mention, for the majority of my career, I did do a lot of fire instructing, so I'm a certified fire instructor.
Okay.
And so I was like, I love doing that, but I also love doing this. Can I marry the two? And that was kind of after a call. So the idea was to just give all this stuff away for free and always just doing that. And that's what After the Call started as.
Okay.
So it started as a website. I kind of pushed it out slow. Did a couple of presentations and really enjoyed that. Did a lot of kind of what I did here, bring up stuff that gets me into trouble. And the response was really good. The response was more surprising than I thought because, and I couldn't even put a number on it where I would be comfortable with, but I would say the majority of the people kind of think the same way, right? Like, nobody's saying it though. It's just these challenges to the nuances that actually exist versus what we might be being told, right? And so that gave me the momentum to keep going. And we always had chats and talks, me and co-founder Dan Corsel, about starting a critical incident stress team. And now that gets some listeners up in arms because I know there's different philosophies on that.
Yeah, there definitely is.
But, this was a way that I had trained folks, because that's the other issue, is people need to be trained, right? So I had trained folks who could go in and at least offer something. And there was nothing. Like, there's nothing there, right? EAP is best as you can get for the areas that we're covering. So I'm trying to think the timeline, but I would say maybe 2 years ago that kind of started, and I just rolled that into the After the Call brand. And so now we have that going as well. We have 12 team members, and we cover our pretty wide breadth of area. And then I started doing consulting work as well. So that's kind of the last branch so far. I only have so much time. I do have a full-time job that I gotta work, but now I go in and just help people with who already have programs up and running but are just looking to close the gap or looking to see what they've got that maybe they need changing or just updating and whatnot. So again, it's really been fire specific. They've kind of welcomed me back with warm hands. But I'm open to discussing and having conversations with, police and EMS and corrections and whatnot as well. It's just about, you've got a program, your people trust it, or at least that's the impression I get. How do we just make it better and more effective?
Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah.
You mentioned your book, Mental Health Awareness for First Responders and Their Families. I have that right? So Tell us about that and how you did that. Yeah,
so you'll notice, and maybe you've picked up on this, my brain is wired to find gaps. And so when I first started doing all of this, we weren't talking about family members. So the very first piece of writing I ever did was posted up on Uniform Stories. It's no longer Uniform Stories. I think it got amalgamated, but I posted it up on there, and it was, families are the silent victims.
For sure.
And what we were talking about, because nobody was talking about it at the time, or at least that I knew of, was what happens to the family dynamic when one of us suffers, from PTSD or from worse or depression, anxiety. And because I think, as you know, it's so ingrained in us to not have conversations with our family members about what we see because of the fact that we're worried about impacting them, which is the irony.
Yeah.
So we won't talk to anybody
because
we can't break that cultural silence and, that thin red line. But then we won't talk to the family members because we're thinking, oh, well, if they hear it, it'll impact them, but it doesn't impact me, right?
Yeah.
It's that rift in our mind, that dissonance that just, anyways.
You know what I find though, Nick, with that, just because that really hits home for me. And what I've found is the aftermath of that, the aftermath of not talking to my family about anything, about work and what I was going through, is that now that I've come through it, I now don't know how to talk to my family because I'm out of practice. So I find it really, really hard to engage in a normal conversation with my wife or my daughter because I didn't do it for years.
Right.
And it's just so weird because you love these people. They're like your favorite people on the earth.
Yep.
But I can't even figure out a way to start a conversation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%, man, 100%. And
it's frustrating. It's embarrassing a little bit because, when I'm honest with my wife, I say like right now I'm in school, so I'm like 5 hours away from my family in school, and there's a couple issues that creates. A, I don't like the phone. The phone is a trigger for me from my dispatcher paramedic background. So the phone I hate. So now I have to talk on the phone, which I don't like, and I have to have a non-face-to-face conversation with my wife and my daughter, and I find it hard to do when I'm face-to-face.
Right.
It's, and I'm honest, and I try to say, I love you, and I want to talk to you so bad, but I have no idea what to say to you, and it sounds so weird.
And I think the important piece in that, saying that though, is the honesty, right? Which is something that's so important, and that we hide, because I think, and again, I'm not trying to be dismissive, but I think most of the first responders, and myself included at the beginning, we have this noble excuse.
Right.
Noble excuse is they can't handle what we see. But the reality is that we just don't know how to talk about it because it's we're not allowed to talk about stuff in the services, right? Emotion is a no-go. Struggles is a no-go. We can't talk about these things. So the irony is we could just get past that. We'd actually probably prevent a lot of this from going on.
Oh my God, totally.
Yeah. And so the book, just drawing back into what we're talking about, is so relevant, is just how to have that conversation, how to start talking. And the important piece is start early so you lay that groundwork. And so I tell people, if you're going to talk, don't talk about the gore and that. They don't need to know that. That's not helpful to us or to them.
Right.
To talk about how it made you feel, right? Just the emotion that you're feeling. If you can only start with happy, mad, sad, glad, folks that I see in my, my private stuff, I say that's good for the first few weeks, but we're going to work on that because you need to increase your lexicon. You need to be able to talk about things a bit deeper than that. Because I can be sad that I missed the bus, but I'm also sad because, maybe one of the dogs dies, but then I'm sad because of these things. And those are varying degrees of sad. So we need better words for it, right?
Yeah.
But I think just the emotional piece is important, and the honesty, right? Just start there. And if we can start there, then we're going to lay the groundwork because you're opening up to the fact that you wish you knew how to talk about it. And that says you want to talk about it, right? So, without going down that rabbit hole too far, I think that's in the most important piece to learning how to talk to each other and to talk to our spouses is, that first honesty, and that second super scary word called emotion. We just got to deal with being able to say, I had a bad call today. I had a rough day. I'm not feeling good. We can use those other scary words like I'm feeling actually like useless, or I was hopeless, or I felt like, my job's to save people when we lost them. Like, I'm feeling whatever that is, sorrow, grief, but also maybe, hopelessness or helplessness. And that lets them know, why you might be slamming cupboard doors or stomping around the house, and takes the confusion away from them. So at least if they know, they're better able and suited to kind of handle us, right? In a way. And then when we're cooled down, they can say, okay, so just talk me through it. And then you can go on your conversations, right?
Yeah, and I've tried to go back and, especially with my daughter, who's 14 now. So when she was really young, that's when I was going through all my stuff unknowingly, and that's when I was going to work, coming home, just checking in barely enough to say I checked in, and then prepare for my next shift. Like, you go to sleep. You eat, you go to sleep. So, trying to explain that to her now, because, obviously I missed out on a lot of stuff. And, trying to explain that to her that, it didn't have anything to do with how much I loved her or how much I wanted to spend time with her, because I wanted to spend time with her more than anything. It was these other things that were happening to me at work unknowingly on my head that led me to, to not, unknowingly led me away from what I wanted to do. So I've started to have these conversations now, which which is obviously, it's late, but it's better late than never. Trying to explain what happened. I think that, and she actually says, yeah, I can understand that. I can see how that, how that worked, because she wants to be a police officer. That's all she ever wanted to. That's all she wants to be for years now. She wants to be a Halifax police officer. So I try to talk to her as much as I can about this stuff, because I know that this is going to be an issue. That she's going to have, trying to make sure she knows where to go and how sometimes things can make you think, and but learning how to communicate in a normal world is tough.
Well, and we don't teach it, right? And this is the thing. I think we spend a whole lot of time, because we have guilt and shame and whatnot wrapped up into it. We spend a whole lot of time blaming ourselves, but nobody, I went to school for this. This is the reason that I learned how to do this stuff, right? Like, it's not just, it was inherent, and some people have it and some people don't. Yeah. I mean, some people's family configurations just allow for conversations to occur, so they're better suited for sure. But it's not like it's not like if I went to school A, I'd learn, my emotional regulation skills, and if I went to school B, I was screwed, it's just not taught. So, and so it's hard to kind of scrape away the guilt that we might have for not knowing, right? So we always look back and say, well, we should have done that. And we're just shooting on ourselves, right? In reality, we didn't have that information. So
yeah,
I think that's an important piece for everybody to learn, that it's like learning a new language. It's exactly like that. Mm-hmm. And if he knows me, they know that I have, my language acquisition skills are nil. Like, I failed French every time I tried it. Every time. But you can learn this one, A, because it's easier than learning French, but B, because it's important and you use it daily once you have it, I think. Anyway.
Yeah, and it certainly is for me. It's my biggest struggle post PTSD diagnosis and post therapy, and reprocessing those memories. The biggest thing I struggle with now is communicating with the people that I care about in a normal way, just to let them know that I value them and want to talk and are interested in their interests. And I don't think I'm unique. I don't think that I'm special in that. I think that it's probably a widespread issue when you deal with first responders, but also humans. I mean, I think it's it's more broad than just first responders, even though that's what I tend to talk about, because that's my background. Where can people get this book if they want the book?
If they just pop online, first page of afterthecall.org, they can download an e-book, an e-copy. If folks want a hard copy, I haven't figured a good system for this yet, so they can just, I got a couple forums, so my email's plastered all over there. Okay. If they want a hard copy, not a hardcover, right. Paper copy, I'll figure out shipping and get it to them. Okay. If they wish to have that.
Cool. All right. So here's another question I want to ask you, because I'm just going to say that you're the firefighter mind guru here, so I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
When most people think of the big three, emergency services, fire, police, and ambulance, no disrespect to corrections or search and rescue or, nurses who are all part of this big family, but I think when people think of EMS or emergency services, fire, police, ambulance. Right. So of those three branches, it is my opinion that firefighters are lagging behind as far as this whole mental health, talking about it thing. I think that police are doing pretty good talking about it. I think paramedics are getting better. I think that firefighters still, for the most part, want nothing to do with it. and I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say they don't want anything to do with it. I think they do want something to do with it, but I think that I see firefighting as, of the three, probably the most armored, thought of themselves as this superhero who runs into burning buildings, who, goes through windows, will carry people out. It's just part of their career. I don't know if that sort of lends to this, like, we are extra tough.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's interesting, though, because I would have not pegged what you were about to peg. And I'm wondering if that is just location.
Maybe. Could be.
Location-wise, right? My experience has been, and again, I'm just trying to think here. My experience has been is fire, at least in my, in the areas that I have been involved in,
right,
100% on board to the point of just kind of running in blind, right? So,
good. I mean, well, that's awesome. That's good to hear.
I think so. I think they're doing something. They're doing something. The majority of the services that I know of around here have all been plied with, mental health first aid, which is great, the first thing to have, and the R2MR program, which is kind of run like, excuse the pun, wildfire through most of the services. People's opinions of those things are differing for sure, but it's rare for me to hear a fire service hasn't had something, even if they have going back to the true roots and have like a chaplain associated with them.
Right.
So it's interesting to hear that, and I'd love to, maybe not here, this isn't the place, but pick your brain about that, because it'd be interesting to see what the dynamics or differences is. If I can add something.
Yeah, go ahead.
I do a lot of writing, and one of the feedback pieces I got for a particular magazine is I challenged the cultural piece of fire. And I said, we need to change the culture, because in kind of getting along the lines of what you're saying is we're not doing enough. And my feedback from the editor at the time was, as far as, the higher ups are concerned, we've done all of these things. So I don't think it's very wise for us to put an article in that suggests that they're not doing enough. And I thought that was astounding.
Huh.
Right?
Wow.
And so, just to kind of solidify my bias and experience, because I know that that's what it is, I then had that published in fire engineering down in the States. They ran with it because they were like, yeah, that makes sense, right? So
yeah,
it's interesting for me to connect with people from the different areas just to see how people are responding, because here I would say my experience has been police might be the furthest behind that I know of.
Okay.
Only because, for me, the OPP, they had the ombudsman a few years ago, so they got the wrist slapped pretty hard.
Right.
And so things needed to change for them. But I've heard varying opinions, and these are local detachment specific. So not, I'm not a spokesperson or would know what the philosophy for the entire organization is, but we're dissatisfied for what they had because it was kind of crammed down their throats, right? And EMS are hit and miss. I think there's a lot of them. Maybe the problem is this. So I'm going on another tangent, but maybe the problem is this: we silo too much, and we don't have it, and for good reason. There's no universal approach to this that works, right? There's no one boot fits all. There's no 2-inch hose line we can pull off and just douse all this, and it's so siloed because it's so specific to those different organizations and their needs. So. I think this is something worth talking a bit more about in why the culture might be different there here and what's going on. Cause like I said, I warned you before, my brain's geared for gaps. So.
That's all good. That's perfect. Yeah, no, thank you for that. I just wanted to bounce that off of you. So, Nick, if anybody wants to get a hold of you or to reach out for you, I know you mentioned the website. Are you on any other social media where they can find you?
Yeah, well, the website has taken a bit of a backseat only because it requires so much upkeep. So if people want to stay current, Facebook or Twitter, you can find me in After the Call on either of them.
Right.
And I have a public profile that anybody can access. So if they just go to Facebook and they type in my name, Nick Halmasy, they see me in my beard glorious bunker gear.
That is a dead sexy picture. I got to tell you.
I know. I should have sent it with a disclaimer.
It is. It is good.
They can add me to that, and I'll kind of add anybody. So don't nobody get offended if I'm not, personally, writing you or whatever. That's just my kind of public profile, and I keep my private life separate. But they can add me on that. Like I always say, it would really be a big help if you liked our page. That just helps us get the message out. But if you got commitment issues, just follow us, so at least we know that the message is being read.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Nick. So, if there's somebody listening right now who is at any level of struggling with, any one of the number of mental health or mental illness issues that they could be, what would you say to them if they were in front of you?
So if they're in front of me, it would depend on what hat I was wearing. But if they're in front of me, I would say that that's normal. There's nothing wrong with you. And that the sooner that you address it, the better off you'll be. I can't be more direct than that. I mean, it's just, without just rambling on because I'm passionate about it, it's just the moment that you think that the nightmares are just a bit too much, or that you feel that, that kind of twang of worry when you get in your car before your shift starts, or that moment you kind of snap with your spouse because you're arguing over who's going to cook dinner, and, you just respond with something that's so outside of what you should have. That's the cue for you to say, I need to just go talk to somebody like I go see my doctor. Once a year is perfect, right? I go see the dentist, you make sure I don't have cavities, go see a therapist so that you make sure that you're mentally well. And this is kind of my push. We talk about changing terms. I guess I'm guilty in one way because my push is always mental wellness, because I think that grasps more clearly what we're trying to do. Because if you think about it in a health model, we go to the hospital only when we're sick, and especially first responders, we only go when we're like super sick, right?
Like way too late. Yeah.
Right, way too late, right? Things are broken, beat up, and you're bleeding by the time you get there, right? But wellness speaks to, I think, and this isn't my idea, this is a guy, Melchert pushed this, between mental flourishing and mental languishing, and it's a continuum. And so, I think more importantly than if you're suffering is that if your life just isn't as good as you think it could be, then that's the moment to go reach out to somebody that you think they can help you make it a bit better. We want to strive towards mental flourishing, not just survival, not just baseline. We want to always be better. And I'm very clear with people. I mean, I see somebody only because, I need to decompress the things that I hear and see, but also because I'm just striving to be better. Right? I'm just striving to, achieve that mental flourishing so that things are just better and they can always be better, right? So, things are good enough in the moment, but they can also be better, and both of those statements are true. So that's a long-winded answer, and I hope that's okay, but that's what I would say to somebody.
Well, that's perfect. That's excellent. Nick, this has been awesome. Thank you, brother, for coming on. This has been great.
Yeah, man, it's glad to finally connect.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah. So, if there's ever something else going on that you're doing and you want to come back on, please let me know. Sweet. If you're, to the listeners, please check Nick out and everything he's doing on After the Call. It's wicked. And, Nick, just take care of yourself and your family and your dogs. And, and just keep doing what you're doing, brother. You're doing good work.
I appreciate that. And I don't know if this is out of place, but if any of your listeners want to check out just kind of the latest and greatest, if they hop onto Firefighting in Canada, my latest article up there about stress and some proactive ways to battle it, they can get that for free online. So,
man, you are a superstar.
Okay.
Crazy. Awesome. Right. Thank you for that, Nick. Right. Take care, brother, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Now my shift is finally over. I gotta deal with what's mine.
That is a good dude. Love talking to Nick. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to Nick for taking the time and for dropping some knowledge. It was great. All right, guys. A couple things that you've already heard about. We're going to keep hammering it. If you like to golf and you would like to golf on Team Tema for the Help Our Heroes Charity Golf Tournament, September 29th at Granite Springs Golf Course in Halifax, you can, and here's how you do it. Email me at tematalks@tema.ca. Give me a screenshot of you following our Facebook page or following us on Twitter or following us on Instagram. Then tell me how you take time out to take care of your mental wellness. And then I want you to tell me what your favorite episode of Tema Talks or an Old Up Talk is and why. That's it. Once we get those emails, we'll draw a name, and that person will complete our foursome. You're going to golf with myself, Kevin Davison, who, if you don't know Kevin Davison, you need to get to know him. Look up Kevin Davison Music. He's a paramedic. We grew up together, best friends for over 30 years. He's also the co-writer of When Those Sirens Are Gone. That's the song that you hear during the podcast. Recently won Video of the Year at the East Coast Music Awards. So you get to golf with myself, Kevin, and David Wilson, who is an NDP MLA in Nova Scotia, former paramedic, huge mental health advocate in general, and especially for the first responders, for all first responders. So you get to golf with us, have an awesome day at this great event put on by Bobby McKenzie, all proceeds going to the Tema Contra Memorial Trust. So let's go, do it. Would love to have you golf with us. Also, a reminder about our Facebook page contest. I think we're up over 800 likes now, trying to get to 1,000. Once we get 1,000 likes, we're going to draw 5 names from all 1,000 names and give away 5 Tema swag bags or gift packs. All right? So keep plugging away, keep sharing the page if you already like it. If you're listening and you haven't seen the Facebook page, check it out and give it a like if you like it. That would be awesome. Thanks again to everybody who continues to support the podcast and share it and leave feedback and listen. Love you guys. Couldn't do it without you. Wouldn't be here without you. So thank you very much. All right, you're going to hear from me in a few days again with another awesome guest. So until then, take care of yourself and each other. More love, less judgment.
'Cause we ain't superheroes, we're just ordinary people trying to make a difference and the first on every scene. And it's a heavy, heavy